What's up, everyone? It's Archon, aka 5th Rate Duelist, and I am here with World's competitor, Steven Santoli, Mr. EXOSISTER, the EXOSISTER God, second place, whatever we want to call you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, great. So, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I guess we'll talk about this year. I guess I had a good year. So I'm going to Worlds. I won the last remote YCS, which is a bit smaller with EXOSISTER. And then I won the points playoff with EXOSISTER, which got me to Worlds. And then throughout the earlier parts of the year, I was playing Sprite basically throughout the entirety of its existence before Elf got banned. I had 2 YCS tops with that, and then I had 1 YCS top, the 250 with the Cashtira. And then a fair few regional tops in between those as well. I've been playing this game for about 12 years, like 2011 I think I started, so yeah, it's been that long now. And I didn't really start traveling to regionals until 2015, and then probably 2017, 2018 is when I started traveling more. Then post-COVID, I kind of had my skills pick up a bit more, and then had better results.
Okay, cool. So here's the burning question that we're all wondering is why EXOSISTER?
So at the beginning of every format, so I'll kind of rewind a bit. Like I said, I've been playing for a long time, and a lot of times I played a bit more rogue stuff because back then I was a bit poorer, so I was playing budget. A lot of times I did well with rogue, to one level or another, and then just kind of realized that like a lot of these rogue decks are decent. So even now that I think I've gone a bit better and willing to play meta more, I still just play whatever I like or whatever I feel is decent. And I still believe that a lot of the times there are unsolved decks or unsolved metagames, and at the beginning of every format I'll go through and test a few decks that I think that might be decent. And so at the beginning of the last list, when Cashtira got hit, I didn't really want to continue playing that deck because I didn't think that it had a lot of glaring weaknesses. Just its weakness to thrust and talents was something that really didn't appeal to me. And so I was just fiddling with other stuff, and one of the things I tested was EXOSISTER. And like I said a few times throughout the profiles I've done, is that it just came out at a bad time, and people did not put time into the deck to realize how good it was. And I didn't particularly pick it up and expecting it to be like take me to Worlds. It was more of I had a regional the first weekend. I was like, okay, I'll play this for fun. I'll think it's decent, has a good runic matchup. And then as I was playing it, it was just realized it had a good coverage into a lot of things. Like the runic matchup was very, very favored, just because they move from their graveyard a lot, but the bigger thing is they don't have a battle phase, so you can just sit on your small guys and they can't swing over them, and then you just force them to go to the grave with your trap cards, and then they all trigger. So the runic matchup was very favored, and the Cashtira matchup, which on paper looks like it's really bad, was just good. Like they had play talents and thrust, and those cards are often dead versus you. They get blown out by tech cards. Like the thing I said, how thrust was so super good against them. Exorcist has a lot of tech cards. You can just play all these breakers and then reset up. And a lot of times I main goes in and I can just breaker them, set goes in afterwards, and still be fine. So the deck just, I got fortunate. That was one of the decks I was kind of testing for. Just kind of go through my cycles and playing it for fun, and it just turned out to be a really good meta call for the events where they were filled with Cashtira and Runic decks.
Okay, wow. That's pretty incredible. Like, you were just playing it for fun, and then it ended up just being, like, the best thing you could have played. Did you get any haters? Like, you're playing EXOSISTER? Like, why are you playing EXOSISTER?
Well, it depends on what level. Like, the people who know me in the general GT area kind of just like they just assume it's me. Like they've known I played a lot worse decks than EXOSISTER through my time. And although I was playing meta throughout the last year, it wasn't really surprising that I would play some random deck. So everyone's calling the deck bad, but it was more just like it's kind of Santoli doing Santoli things, just playing some rogue deck. And I topped the first Toronto region I played it at. I got 8th place, so I squeaked in there. So it's kind of already them being like, well, I guess it's it's just whatever, him doing his own thing. But yeah, the remote YCS, a lot of people were just like, this deck isn't real. Like it's just a remote event. I think it's just a good example of people have kind of this perceived notion of what the deck is, and they just assumed it was bad because it was worse than Sprite and Tier 1 as a thing. And also people hate back row cards, they hate trap cards, they hate floodgates, and so it's just like this kind of cheesy strategy without going through a lot of the time to develop the deck, because the deck has great game shots. Like Airtom is 8k by itself, Airtom is 3 interruptions by itself, and so if you say that in a vacuum, it's like one card, 3 interruptions, and in the mid range deck seems pretty good. Using game shots seems pretty good. Be able to play floodgates and the loft deck card seems pretty good. So I think that a lot of people who were really chirping the deck just hadn't put the time into to see how good it was, and you can't really blame them either. Like it's the majority of decks out there that people kind of hype up a lot are getting hyped up because they like it as opposed to being good. But I just got fortunate that it was good when I was testing it. So
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's a good point too. Is that like people had this perception of like remote duels, YCSs not being real type of a thing. It's like, oh, EXOSISTER won, and then you did the ultimate power move, and freaking got like to the finals of the world qualifier points thing, which is like now everyone can shut the hell up. And that happened with Polly too, because Polly won a remote YCS, and everyone's like, oh, that doesn't count. And then he won the 250th, and they're like, oh, maybe it does count.
3 out of the 4 players in top 4 of the playoffs were remote YCS winners. Like Pac also has a remote YCS win. And theirs are a bit better than mine, bigger, but the point stands. Like I think that yes, there is some form of cheating online, but if you see people already transfer the results to in person, then it doesn't really make sense. Like it's just another event for any of us. We've shown consistency through in-person events, so it's being forced to play online isn't going to change anything.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point. All right.
Also, I think a lot of people didn't really know me beforehand. Like I'm well known in the GTA area, and I think a fair bit of American guys know me or know me face-wise, but they don't really know my playstyle. So, you see some random person win with EXOSISTER. I think it's fair to question it, and I mean, people can say whatever they want about that. Because the fact that it was good, and I could do a repeat at the playoffs was nice. But it's fair to be critical of it. But you also need to be putting time into it when you're being critical of it, which I think a lot of people just didn't do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I definitely have it. There is a video recording of me saying like, oh, EXOSISTER only won because no one knows what that deck does. And then like my editor overlaid like your deck like with the WCQ like final listing on it as I was like going on about how that deck sucks. So yes, I have been one of the ignorant ones, I guess you could say.
I mean, the other thing is it's just weird because the deck in a vacuum isn't phenomenal. Like if you go play it at, like you start playing against other matchups, like you start playing against like Sword Soul or other stuff, like lower tier decks, it feels worse. Like it gets worse the lower down you go. It was just had a great matchup spread against the top tier decks, which again I think people don't even talk about when they want decks to be good in a vacuum and good against everything, or like feel good by themselves. But the fact that I just had the best 2 decks of the format were very good matchups was enough for me just by playing at this format.
Did you have anyone else to work with on EXOSISTER, or did you basically do it by yourself?
The one guy plays it. I'm good friends with plays a lot of Master Duel. So he kind of gave me the starting roots of it. So we worked on it a bit there, but most of it was more so me. That being said, it's not particularly the most innovative deck. Like I'm just playing Gozen and Breakers in it. So I did have a little bit of help from him, but most of my test group was just on other stuff as well. Like they give me reps and help me win the other matchups, but it was more just kind of me developing it further. And the OTK lines were just through practice. Like I played that deck at 2 regionals back to back, and then I played at the remote. So I had a lot of time to kind of just fumble upon things, and things happen in the game and the regional, and then you kind of go back and think about it afterwards. And it's okay, how does this actually work? Oh, Martha plus name is AK. Actually, wait. Any 2 names is AK, or Airtom is AK. So a lot of it was just kind of me learning and developing the deck just from the regionals and the events that I played with it.
Okay. Did you play a going second version, or was it either or?
It was going first. It was because you have a lot of room for tech cards, so the engine can go, or the deck can go second fine because you have all the tech cards. But I was still going first. Your end board's kind of ignorant because you have the Magnifica plus the Banish from Michaelis underneath, and then returning as well. And your first interaction being a trap interaction is nice because it means talents and thrusts are shut off for a long time. Like you've already interrupted a lot of their plays before talents and thrusts are alive. And then Gozen's obviously an ignorant card, so it was going first. And the format was kind of weird, so I played some breakers in the main as well because if I got chosen to go second, I could draw breakers, or I could draw Prot into the breakers, which was kind of a big thing. But no, the idea was to go first. and then side into breakers when I need to.
Okay. We have a question in the chat. How did Steven manage to dodge kaijus?
So there's two things. One is you just get lucky, and the second thing is goes in. So a lot of people, when looking at my profile, whether they're supportive of it or not, talk about how the deck just folds in Nib or Kaijus, and it's true. Like, those are two super good cards versus me. But then you look at the other top tier decks, it's like Cashier can fold the Nib as well. Cashier feels hold harder to evenly. Runic decks fold really hard to Italian Sea. So the format is really diverse in terms of tech cards. It's not like every single person you sit down against has Nib or Kaiju somewhere in their list. Like, a lot of the opponents you play against don't have them. And if they have one, they probably don't have both. So, I'm playing, if you look at a regional, like playing 9-run regional at Toronto, I got nibbed by 2 people, I think. I got Kaiju by 1, though one player I got Kaiju by had goes in the 3rd game for it, so I wasn't getting Kaiju that way. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is that, I built my deck somewhat to try and mitigate these blowout cards in the form of Neighbor, Kaiju's in the form of Maiden goes in, which isn't the best go second card, but it was fine because it's obviously a good card and it helps you beat the silver bullets of the deck. But the other percent of the time is you can just take the L of that. Like, every deck has, especially this format, like, we're not in Sprite tier format where they just play through everything. Like, every deck kind of has these cards that are super good against them. And, if it's not your day and you get hit by them every round, then that's unfortunate. But I didn't think that they were in the meta enough to justify not playing the deck. And the times I got hit by it, then, it's unlucky if I get hit by both games, but usually I don't. And then I just win the other 2 games in the match.
Okay. So how old were you when you started playing Yu-Gi-Oh?
2011, so I would have been 14, 15, something like that. I guess I played when I was younger, but those are kind of just like jank piles of like, oh, I buy a pack, let's put these packs into a deck. But more like even a level would have been 14, 15.
Okay, so you're like what, 26 now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Did you ever? Oh no, you're too old to do Dragon Duels and stuff like that, right? Okay. We have another question in the chat. Do you think there are any other decks this format that people are sleeping on?
Not particularly in my opinion. I think Vanquish Roll is actually a pretty cool deck. That's kind of known as well. I think Runic Plunder is also kind of cool, but not particularly anything that comes to my mind. But I mean, I think everyone kind of. I think there are a lot of people out there that are probably playing some random deck that I think has a great matchup against things, and the meta probably should be more diverse than it is. I think a lot of people go to comfort and go to what's known. And even if when they're playing like the quote unquote rogue decks, they're not going super far. Like, they're not playing something like EXOSISTER or something. They're playing something like Sword Soul or stuff, which is still more known rogue decks. So there probably is a lot of undeveloped decks. But I don't have all the answers. I don't see everything. It's just I was fortunate to find one, and there's probably other things that are out there as well. I think a good example of this as well is you look at Edison format, where 2011 it was a kind of Blackwing meta, Gladi Beast meta, and the amount of decks that are still coming out to, like, Edison started booming at the end of COVID, so it's probably been around 2-3 years in the current time player base playing it. There are still new decks coming out of that format. So if we had this format forever, and if it was an eternal format, then we'd probably see a lot of meta elements still, but there's nothing on top of my head that jumps out.
That's fair. Also, I feel like, I don't know, Nats is over, we don't have a big event till like August, and so, I don't know, I don't feel like playing. But I might get into Edison. I built a fairy deck, so, and I have ulti orange light, so that's why I want to play it.
Really enjoy Edison. I recommend it for a lot of people. And it's interesting because it's a completely different game, obviously, because how much slower it is, not many combos, but it's still very same type of game where a lot of the small interactions between cards are what make it. And it happens in current format as well. Like, you misuse a hand trap, or you use a book to break a board, and you could held that for next turn and you lose because of it. A lot of that's still in Edison, so I think it's you can learn something as a current player going back and trying to get better at these older formats, because they seem to me not as much depth because there's not much actions going on, but it's still focusing on the small interactions that make you a better player.
Yeah. like some pros explained to me, because I was like, old formats are like slow. You just do like two things on one turn, like set to pass.
Yep.
And they were like, and like now formats like tier limit, you do like 5,000 things, like on
Yep.
your turn and the opponent's turn. But they were saying that like if you think about it, like it's the same amount of interaction, just over more turns. Would you
Yes.
agree with that?
To some degree. I mean, the game has gotten more complicated, but I think a lot of the actions are not decision points to make. You know, if I'm going through like cash tier combo, I'm doing how many interactions, special unicorn, search Cathiosis, Cathiosis, and Fenrir, but those aren't really decision trees for me. Like I'm not like there's not as much choice there. It's, oh, I opened one starter, this is my end board. So while there are a lot more actions in current format, I don't think it necessarily always leads to more complicated games. I think sometimes it does lead to more complicated games, especially when you're trying to think through playing hand traps and stuff. But you know, the difference between them is there is an increase, but I don't think it's super dramatic.
Okay, that makes sense. We have another question. People are kind of wondering about like how you go about deck building. Like, how do you figure out ratios, like number of 2-ofs, 3-ofs consistently, things like that.
So some of it is based in math. I don't like overbasing in math. Like I always watch these profiles where it's like, oh, you play, X number of copies, and then it's like an 87% chance of opening it. It's like there's no reason 87 is optimal. There are things that are relevant, like if you're going with the first deck, you don't want to have more than 5 go second cards in it, in the main deck at least, because then you're more likely to draw multiples. So that's something I try to keep in mind. And then for cards that are good to draw, but I don't need to see them, and I don't want to see multiples, like the Shifter incident. I play 2 of those.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, a lot of it is just what I feel is good. If a card's really impactful, I want to play at 3. If a card's less impactful, I play it at 2. And I think a lot of people kind of over-fixate on deck building. And because especially with tech cards, it's what do you feel is good for the format? What do you feel are good answers for things? And like I said, like I think there are some things that are wrong. Like if you're going first and playing like 10 go second cards, like that's wrong. That's too many. But the small kind of, oh, I'm playing 2 book, 3 ash instead of vice versa. I think that's just what I'm thinking my worst matchups is, what I want to approach the meta. I want to have a better matchup for Brand as opposed to cash or stuff like that. I think they're very small decisions, and there's more to gain from focusing on gameplay than focusing on whether a card is a 2-of or a 3-of. That's at least for the weird ratios. In terms of deck building, otherwise, I just try to make sure I have a plan going into every matchup and make sure that if I'm sitting down against something, I know I'm trying to do. So EXOSISTER was, I think, somewhat straightforward. Like I had goes into to block out Nib and Kaiju, so at least help mitigate the effectiveness of those cards. I had good plans going second because I had thrust and a lot of breakers, so I knew what I was trying to do there. And it just spans other formats as well. I remember playing a Math Mech at a regional when Pearly first came out, and everyone was on. We were talking about Vandy's Fiend in Pearly, and Math Mech has a hard time mounting that card. A lot of people were like, "Oh, you just play Eccentric for it," but you couldn't because they would search the Pearly spell that prevents destruction. So for that regional, I was siding Tsukiyomi, so that if I play against Pearly and I hand trap them and they're just ending on Vanities, I could small world in the Tsukiyomi and book the Vandy's Fiend, and then just play. So I have a lot of weird techs like that, where it's like, the Tsukiyomi. In the main event for Nats, I was siding Zombie World, Necro Valley, and Terraforming, because I found that the Flu and Dragon matchups were rough, and so I was already playing Thrust. I just decided to play that package, which was, more silver bullets for that kind of matchup. So I think it's good to go in and maybe have a good plan into every matchup, and sometimes that's a bit weirder cards. I think Thrust and Druid Mechanic was also something popular, and I was doing that a bit before it was popularized by whoever popularized it. So I try to gain small edges like that, and a lot of these things are only going to come up once or twice a regional or once or twice a tourney. But if it's giving you a game, that's worth putting in your deck then.
Okay, I like that type of thing. Yeah, I know, like, deck building is, like, extremely difficult for me, and, like, normally I would kind of get a list from someone else, but I've been playing, like, Purely, and I just didn't know anyone else playing Purely. I mean, I know there are people that play Purely, but they're not going to give me their list. So I just kind of had to figure everything out myself. And so my question is, how do you go about playtesting? Are you a DB person? Do you do open hand? Like, what exactly do you do?
So I will do DB for the initial parts of a format, just to get enough reps in with a deck to understand the basic combos or whatever. But I don't particularly enjoy DB testing that much. I think that you kind of get a mess of things online. And the play base is good at the higher levels, but I don't particularly enjoy it. I don't ever really want to force myself to test if I'm not enjoying it. So I much prefer to like grind locals or grind regionals. And you do get less play than if you're just grinding DB all day, but it's a more accurate environment. So I think a lot of people talk about it feels better to play with the cards in person. I definitely believe that. I think also you're not getting a concentration of ideas. So if you're playing with a small playtest group, then you kind of may like develop your own metagame within that test group, and then it may just be completely wrong. And the team the people I test with have that happen a lot, where we go and just bully each other with these random decks and think they're great, and then we go to an actual event and we get destroyed. So we've had to make conscious decisions now of actually getting outside testing as well, because so we don't have those local metas for them. But I think that as long as you are playing in some environment, whether that's DB or whether that's locals or regionals, and you're in a clear space and reflecting upon your wins and losses with a good mindset, then that's sufficient practice.
Okay. Did you ever get tournament anxiety when you started?
I didn't get it much when I started. It was more so later on. Like when I first started, it was just okay. I'm just playing this card game for fun. I go to regionals. I just kind of do whatever. So it wasn't any pressure on me. I think after I started topping more, it was more pressure, especially when formats change over, because then you're a more known name. People expect you to win. And there's always like that imposter syndrome in the back of your head is like, oh, I'm actually a good player, or did I get lucky for a period of time? And even if you know that, I'm good at this game to some level, you still have that kind of looming. And so I just spend, I think, a decent amount of time thinking about my mental state going into an event and just trying to find a balance between wanting to win but not being too stressed, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. But if you look at other games, like if you look at golf or poker, a lot of people talk about this, about trying to have that good mental space between not playing too loose and going, oh, well, this doesn't matter, and then you're not focused enough to actually find winning lines when you need to, and at the same time not being so fixated on winning that you're getting tilted and getting frustrated when losses may be appearing to come. And there's no particular way I do that. I just kind of remember to focus on good gameplay and the decision I'm making, because if I'm making good decisions in the long run, I'll have success in the game. If the tournament gets unlucky, it gets unlucky. But just focusing on my gameplay and the choices in the game is a good way to keep my head level and go from there. I think it's funny someone brought this over. I'm not sure if you brought it up, but in that top 32 playoff bracket, like everyone was stressed out of their mind, obviously, because they're fighting for a spot to Worlds. I think I was probably one of the least stressed players there, just because I had done a really good job of just getting myself in a good mental space of I'm playing against really good players. I need to get a bit lucky, but other than that, I just play my game. So while a lot of people were playing very, very tense and very stressed, and of course it's reasonable, I think that me having a clear mind gave me a bit of a edge there.
Yeah, like that's the thing is like if I ever play against like a well-known player, I just have a lot of anxiety, which is why I started like. By the way, if you want to have a duel, if you have time after this, but I know you're probably busy preparing for Worlds, so we don't have to.
I'll probably
so
we'll see when we finish.
Okay, and so like that's where I would like make the people I interview do with me. So I would like work on that. So I do like Jesse, Isala, whole like everyone I interview on my podcast, just so I don't feel so anxious in person. And I did beat Jesse, but then when we did a run back, he beat me with Crystal Beast, so we're even. But I don't know, like that's like there's like a mental game I hear about where pro players like say stuff to get in your head, and it just like it stresses me out.
Yeah, I think this is a thing that a lot of people have, and they don't really focus on it at all. Like no one talks about the mental game in YuGiOh, which is kind of weird because people talk about it in other games. Like you hear League players talk about tilt and how to address it. It's a very common thought in poker and golf, and so there's no reason you can't really translate this game. It's just spending some time kind of solving your you're clearing your headspace before returning. Like if you're in game and thinking about, I travel all this way, it's a waste of time in game. Like that's lowering your win rate. And maybe the game you're playing was unwinnable, and you thinking that didn't matter. But over the long term, if you're playing 1,000 games with that mentality, you're going to have a lower win rate than you did before. And so just kind of reminding yourself of why you're focusing, and trying to find that good balance between too stressed and too loose is, I think, very important.
Yeah, I think that's good. I'm trying to develop like pre-rituals and stuff. So like I got this lavender scent, and so like the smell is what's most strongly connected to memory. So back in like high school, my chemistry professor's like, "Hey, if you're studying, smell some chocolate, and then before your test, smell some chocolate, and like it'll help like you remember stuff." So I started doing that, but with like this lavender scent to like smell it when I'm doing well, so that way if I smell it before a match, it helps calm me down and try to like level me. And then I have like Play-Doh that I like to play with and stuff like that. But I just get so anxious during tournaments, and like I zone out a lot too. So I don't know, like at Nats, it's sort of like I was doing misplays that I would never have done in testing. Like I tested mostly with Polly, but some other people too, and a lot of DB. And it's like the exact same scenario happened, and for some reason I would misplay instead of doing the right thing. And I was like, I don't know what's up.
Yeah, I think we all have that. Like it's not like I don't misplay at all, but I think it's just getting enough reps to hopefully remove most of the misplays, and they're going to happen, of course. Like people are going to screw up, especially if you get in a tense enough scenario. If you misplay about something that you haven't practiced, and so you get frustrated that, then you're doing something more familiar, but you're already out of your kind of game. I think that one thing that's I read that was good is that when you start getting tilted or when you start getting stressed, is you don't forget everything, you forget what you're learning. And so if you haven't practiced something enough times to really for it to be truly muscle memory, you can always forget it. But there is a certain amount of practice, and it may be more than like we would want or we expect for us to actually memorize. But there's a certain amount of practice where if you do it enough, that it doesn't matter how tilted you get, you will remember at least this part of it. And I think that's kind of a good reason to keep playing one deck for a while, or at least commit to a deck for a format. Because if you're flipping back and forth between decks, then you get punished because you don't have the time to build up that muscle memory, so to speak. But I think practice does help alleviate that to some degree. Obviously, it's going to happen occasionally, but we just try. The whole goal is just to minimize the stakes, not to remove them completely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. Kind of like turning into muscle memory and stuff. But yeah, I do DB as much as I can. Because Polly can't always. Obviously, Polly's really busy. He can't always test with me. So I do a lot of DB, but I don't know. DB is just like, it just sucks my soul away. It's so toxic and like stressful.
I always say to people, if you're frustrated testing, then it's not good testing because you're not taking time to learn things. You're not going to be able to focus on things. And before COVID, I remember I was testing for events. Like I would just force myself to go to locals, and like I'd be exhausted after a day at work. And now I don't do that. Like if I'm frustrated playing the game, then I'm not going to play the game. And even when I was grinding the world points, like there was never a point where I was like, okay, I need to go to all these regionals. Like I'm enjoying the game right now. I'd like to go to these regionals. And there were some points where it's like I had some other social event, or it's just like, I want a week off, and I just take it off. And if at the end of the day it was the result of me not making playoffs or not, then that's unfortunate. But I think in the long run, having a better mindset is going to increase your win rate, and you're going to have more success as a result. I also don't know how much DB translates over to in person. Like we always kind of say there's that barrier. Like if you do 10,000 games of DB, does that mean you can pick up your deck in real life and have that muscle memory there, or is there something different between the computer, the cards? Like I know there are a lot of good players that grind DB, but I don't particularly think it works. So it might be kind of a balance between. Like I said, it might not say so much of a balance, but it might just be more dependent on the player about whether they find that efficient testing or not.
Yeah. I feel like DB is easier than in real life because you can just read the cards. And like, you can kind of like think, and like, everything's like logged, so if you forget something, you can just go check. But like, and then also, there's no time pressure like there would be at locals. So that was kind of a bad thing, is that I did a lot of like DB testing, and then when it came to Nats, it's like, I wasn't really paying attention to time, and like I was just losing in time. Like there was one match where, like, I wasn't paying attention to the clock. I paid 500, and then immediately after that, the time went off, and I was like, oh my god, I was not paying attention. So it's just like stuff like that. Like you don't learn off GB. So I need to like do more in person too.
You want your in real life or your testing, I should say, to be as close as possible to the tournament settings, and obviously that's not possible in all senses. Like regionals are gonna be more stressful than locals, YCS is gonna be more stressful than regionals, but you want to try getting it as close as possible, because then when you're putting these scenarios, you're more comfortable with them and it's more familiar.
Yeah, yeah, and I think also on DB they can't really like read your facial expressions and stuff, but I think people can tell stuff by the way I like move my face and stuff.
People say I have very clear tells because especially when we watch feature matches, like I'm making a lot of interesting faces there, which I don't know how good it is. Like I don't know how much the hand knowledge is, or like kind of that bluff face is that important. Especially like I think more of the game states I'm kind of open about, like facially open about, and able to be read are kind of solved game states already. So it's not as important, but yeah, it's something I probably work on as well.
That's true. How do you study the meta?
I guess it's just a combination of things. Like I just try to get as much information as possible and then just think about. So, you see watch a lot of profiles, watch a lot of highlight DB if I'm not playing it, and I have my test group, which we're usually testing stuff, and there's decent enough players in there, and we're usually all testing at least some good portion of the meta decks and just figuring things out. And then a lot of it's just kind of me thinking on my own, like especially with a lot of the weird techs, like the Drew McCann tech or the Tsukiyomi tech and Math Mech before. Well, the Tsukiyomi wasn't on, but before the Drew McCann was discovered. So a lot of it was just kind of thinking about potential problems that can arise with the deck you're playing, and then trying to figure out solutions to them. And I think a lot of people fixate on the decks in the meta as opposed to tech cards in the meta. Like a lot of people say, oh, like Cash is the best deck, Runic's the second best deck, but I don't particularly care as much about the best deck. I care more about the tech cards, because the tech cards, a lot of times when I choose a deck, I choose it based on the tech cards of the format as opposed to the actual decks. Like in Full Power, it's usually tier format. I refused to play tier. I played Sprite the entire format, and yeah, the deck was weaker, but they used Bestials better. They lost to them significantly less. They used Shifter better. They lost to them significantly less. And so, even if I'm playing a weaker deck, I think it lined up into the tech cards. I think EXOSISTER was the same thing. It loses less to like these kind of pseudo breakers like Econ, Book, Talents, Thrust. And so having a good matchup in the tech cards are being played, or having your tech cards aligned well with their tech cards or their engine, I think is something that people don't really think about too much. And I base most of my deck choices on that more so than kind of the individual matchups.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense, like, because just because something's the best deck doesn't mean that it's gonna, like, win all the time. Because if it's the best deck, it also has a target on its back.
The one thing I try to do a lot is I don't build to beat the best deck, I build to beat the cards that beat the best deck. Because if you sit down at a regional, especially for lower events, you sit down at a regional, you may play 9-round event, you may play 7 rogue decks. But the thing is, every rogue deck is going to be building to beat the best deck. And so, like, go back to the tier Sprite example, it's like I'm sitting down, everyone has Bestials in their deck. My third summon is gigantic, like they're completely dead versus me. And so I get punished a lot less against rogue decks than if I were to play the best deck, or if I were to play a deck to beat the best deck, because maybe that deck also loses to the Bestials. So Sprite is a good example of that, or EXOSISTER as well. It's like you can have Thrust and Talents in your deck, like I'm flipping Goes in or flipping back row, and you're getting punished by that. And so this different approach is something I kind of stand by, and I will play a weaker deck just to deal with tech cards better. And I mean, it's worked for me. I think a lot of people don't, but I think it's a very effective way of looking at the meta game.
Chat says Steven is big brain. That's wild. I never thought about that, but that makes so much sense. Man, thank you for all this valuable knowledge. Do you do coaching?
Not at the moment. I may do it in the future. I haven't really put much time into it. Also, like I said, I don't think I was a super well-known player before this event. Like I think EXOSISTER kind of popularized me. I did have a good year overall, especially with Sprite, but I may look into that more. The one thing is I don't want to kind of give false coaching, and it's not to say that I don't have things to offer. I think that it's just I want to make sure that I'm not giving false information for decks because I'm not good at all decks. I think a lot of people kind of try to spread their wings too far, arms too far. I don't know what the expression is, but I'm good at several amount of decks. But if you tell me how do I play Dragon Link or Runic decks, like I don't know, I can't help you with that. So if I offer, I think I'll offer in the strengths, which is more mid-range decks. I definitely feel comfortable helping people with that because that's my strengths. But I think that we should all kind of find a style we like first, and go with that. And then people who have similar style to me, then I can obviously help more. So
Okay, makes sense. Technically, you can't be a jack of all trades. That's hard to do. But I definitely have seen it where Metafy coaches are like, yeah, I can help you, and it's like they don't actually know anything about the deck. So.
Yes. And it does depend, depending on the little player. If someone's trying to get an invite, I can probably help them with a more combo-oriented deck, just based on fundamentals. Focus on the thing I talked about earlier was getting yourself a good mindset, effective practicing, siding, stuff like that. I can definitely help, but there's definitely more efficient ways of practicing or more efficient coaches you can go to than me if you're trying to learn combo decks. Where if you're coming to me for a mid-range deck, then yes, that's much more efficient.
That's fair. Oh, I got my invite yesterday.
Good, congrats.
Yes. So now I can be lazy for the rest of the year. But I'm excited because I have 1 World's Point, which is more than a lot of people who were in the World's Points playoff.
More than me currently.
Yay! So yeah, but then I found out that Nax counts for World's Points, so I'm not actually above everyone.
Oh, does that? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I forget his name. The guy who won has the most World's Points.
Ah, that's unfortunate. We'll see if I do the grind next year. I don't know.
So, what happens if you go to Worlds and you win Worlds? What's your next step?
I'll keep playing. There's not really much focus on the large prizing or anything like that. I just focus on the gameplay, and if I play well, and I'm enjoying it, then why would I change anything? Which I think is again counterintuitive to what a lot of people say. Especially if you look at other things, a lot of people say second place is the same as last or stuff like that. And I don't believe in that kind of mindset. If I go to a regional and I get invited, I'm happy because it shows consistency and it shows that maybe even not my peak performance that I'm doing well. This year I had probably 8, 9 finishes at regionals between 8th and 12th. And so it was playing well, losing to other good players, and finishing X2. And it's if I play well and I'm happy with my list, then I should be happy with that result. So I approach Worlds the same way. Whatever happens at Worlds, I'm going to have a good time and learn some things. It'll be an experience, but I'm going to come back and do something similar to what I'm currently doing now.
Okay. Yeah, I guess if it's not broke, don't fix it type of a thing.
Yeah, and maybe I should have more drive, but I don't really care much about cloud or anything like that. So it's just I play well, I enjoy it, and then whatever happens after that happens.
It's okay. There's no clout in YuGiOh. The pro players think there is clout, but there's really no clout in YuGiOh.
Yeah.
But it's funny because all these pro players, they'll get 4th out of YCS, and they'll be they'll go on Facebook and just rant. They're I'm washed. I suck so much. What's wrong with me? And it's bro, 4th is good. So
yeah, it's funny kind of seeing the difference between me and a lot of other top players in terms of mentality, where they really want the win, and anything less than that's not good. And that's their mindset. I'm not saying it's a poor mindset, but we don't have a lot of people that are relaxed, I think, in terms of how they look at results, be at the top a lot. But I think it's a completely valid strategy. There's the one guy in the NBA, I can't remember his name, I think it was Niccolo or something, and then when he won the NBA, they asked him how do you feel, and he's just I'm happy to go home. And I much more embody that, where it's just go in, enjoy yourself, do well, and then after that you're moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a healthy attitude. We have a question in chat. How do you maintain your mental and will to train once you hit your goal? For example, winning locals, getting an invite, things like that.
I think the biggest thing is I just enjoy the game. So I think that I'm never forcing myself to overplay or to spend hours and hours online on DD. I spend time to think about the game. I think thinking about the game is enjoyable. And playing the game isn't always enjoyable, but thinking about the game is usually enjoyable and talking about it. So I just make sure that I'm never burning myself out. And as much as I grinded a fair bit of regionals this year, I never felt that I needed to take a break from the game. Like there was weekends I took off. Maybe I could have traveled 8 hours for a regional, but like I'd rather just do something else. But just making sure you're enjoying the game and not overworking yourself is a good step towards that. And then the other thing is just being happy with the small things. Like I said, like I'm happy getting an invite still, and a lot of people, once they get a few, aren't happy with that. But you're deciding what your goals are and what you're happy with. So if you go and say, "Oh, invites don't matter," and you're telling yourself that, and you're telling other people that, then when you get your invite, you're not going to be happy with it. But if I go and say, "Oh, regionals are hard," it's a representation of playing well. If I get my invited regional, then I'm going to be happy with that result. And it's interesting as well because I got my first invite, I think, in 2017, 2018, and that was also top 8. And like
Nice.
after that, I was saying, all I care about is the top 8. Like I don't need an invite anymore. And even though I've gone significantly better than then, because I had 0 premier tops before COVID, and now I have like 6. Even though I've gone significantly better, I actually have a lower standard for what I'm happy with, just because I should be. Because I don't think you gain anything by being hard on yourself. Because I think that you can take the small things, be happy with them, and still aim for higher things. And I should also point out, it doesn't mean that you're kind of happy at everything. Like if I go to regional and I punt 2 games and I finish X2, like I'm not going to be happy with that performance. But if I go in playing Mathmech and I get shifted like 6 matches and I finish X2 because the techs I have for the deck answered the shifter and I played well the other matches, like then I'll be happy with it. So just focusing on gameplay and being happy with smaller results, I think, is a good way to keep a good mental.
Okay. I like that philosophy type of a thing. I know Dinken Fam was telling me that as long as you are satisfied with the plays that you make and you did the best, you don't have to be upset if you lost.
Yep, like it is a card game. And I always find it funny when people sit down and they're obviously just venting. There's no ill will towards them, but they start venting like, "Oh, you drew this card." It's like as soon as you sit down and you start shuffling a deck, like you're accepting the fact that there's luck involved, and you can try mitigating it as much as you can, but like through good deck building or good play. But it is a hard game. Like if you're getting high rolled and that's just the day it is, like you just sit back and laugh. And I think that's the other good thing is we have a bunch of other people you travel with, like usually or hopefully someone in the group does well to some degree, so you can at least have a good trip through them. But yeah, I don't think it's if you have to just accept the luck. It's a card game. If you're fixating on the bad draws or the luck, you're wasting time on improving or enjoying yourself, which are both more important.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point. I know I was upset because I played through Eradicator and then I got debarriered and I was like so sad. But like
I mean,
I also misplay, so it's okay.
and the thing is as well is like there are reasons to be upset. It just shouldn't be overwhelming. Like if you're getting errated deeper, it's like yeah, like spend your 5-10 minutes ranting about it. You can tell everyone what local's at, but as long as you're not losing your sense of like as long as you're not over fixating on that issue, then I think it's fine. The other thing I think as well is people over stress about playing perfect. They go like, "Oh, I lost," but there's this weird line I could have done to win. It's like you don't have to look back at every one of your losses and say, "Oh, I could have done something differently every one of these losses, and then I could have won, or I could have been in a better position, or whatever." Like you are allowed having games where it's just like this game was nonsense. You had no business drawing like that. Like it was just the variance game. I just took the L there. And if you're looking back on your games and you're saying that about 10% of your games and the other 90% you have efficient reflection on, even if it's like 50-50. Like if you're looking at 50% of your games and say I did something wrong here, you're still improving with that. So I don't think that going too far the other direction where it's like everything is your fault is necessarily efficient either if it's affecting your enjoyment of the game or if it's getting you frustrated. So burning off steam sometimes is fine, but you just want to find that balance between okay, I'm gonna be frustrated for a moment here with this game, and then I go back to cool head for the rest of the journey and the rest of the games that I lost. I can look back on more efficiently.
Yeah. It's about like keeping your cool. That's something that like a lot of people I know struggle with. It's like the whole tilt factor that I misplay or they do better or I forgot to do this and it just like it's like a freaking like a boulder down a hill. Like, I don't. There's like a term I don't remember. But yeah,
Snowball effect, something like that.
snowball. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you talk to a lot of the players as well, like they'll have some egregious story, and you just kind of have to laugh at it at some point. Like the last regional before like the tier elf hit list, like that big list we had in February, I played tier regional just because I wanted to experience it once. I remember one of the later rounds, I summoned Kikalis and just didn't use its effect because I just forgot because I had like 8 chain links instead of like the 2 I used to with Sprite. I just started laughing. Like it's just funny. Like it was just so nonsense. And so having that kind of ability to laugh at things is good. And again, like you're going to be frustrated sometimes, but you're trying to mitigate that in the long run.
Okay, that's fair. All right, time for the fun questions. What is your favorite deck ever?
Sprite, by far. I absolutely adore that deck. I had a lot of success with it, but if I could go back and play full power Sprite again, I still would be. And every format, I try testing Sprite and try figuring out stuff with it. It just really embodies what I wanted. Deck. It had good follow up. It had good consistency, so it was never an issue. And you had a lot of choice in tech cards, so if you got rewarded by choosing good tech cards of the form, which is something I spent a lot of time on, it made the deck feel better. It wasn't even close. Sprite's my favorite deck.
Okay, nice. I like Draytron. My first
I do not.
non-locals event. You do not?
No.
What? Okay, Draytron and me have a special relationship because it was my first combo deck I picked up, and I remember I picked it up and I got last place at locals, like 4 locals in a row, and then Gamer's Choice had the first in-person event like since COVID. And it was 200 people, and I practiced Draytron for 6 hours in a plane. That's all I freaking did. And I got second place out of 200 people. And so, like, I feel like, it's close to my heart. And I've won, like, so many things, like, with the Draytron.
Signature deck, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, like, what I'm known for playing. But, I don't know. I like Purely, but I picked it because it's cute.
I think I'm known for EXOSISTER, which is funny because I don't really have any attachment to that deck. Like, it was good for the meta. I'm probably not playing it next format. Like, it didn't really have any love for it. It was whatever. But that's kind of what I'm known for when I was on a good tail with Sprite. So it's just funny I wasn't known for that.
Oh, yeah. Well, there were a lot of Sprite players, and there's exactly one EXOSISTER player.
2. You got Raymond Die as well.
Oh, that's fair, yeah. He won. That YCS in Canada, I think it was.
Yeah, he won Niagara.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Okay, chamber, parlor, or kitchen?
I'm sorry, are we asking what the Dragon Mates? God, give me a second. I'll make sure I'm not answering wrong here. Chamber. I feel like one of these is a completely wrong answer. Making sure I'm not saying the wrong answer.
This is the most important question, by the way.
Chamber. Yeah, I'll say chamber.
That's fair. I like parlor. I think she's cute. Okay. How do we find you?
In general, I don't. I don't have much in terms of grand social media. Maybe I'll make a Metafy in the future and look from there. But I'm not planning on investing a super large amount of time in terms of like content creation because I think it's hard to do content creation and focus on the game as well as not put too much time into this. So. For now, I will remain somewhat hidden until I appear on these shows and whatnot, but maybe look for a Metafy in the future.
Okay. And before we go, on Thursday, I'm having a fundraiser stream for my cat Eva's medical expenses. She has epilepsy. And we are going to have Steven and a bunch of other people who were in the World's Points qualifiers doing a podcast together. So leave a comment if you want to ask a question to them. A podcast like this has never been done before. You get to find out how it works, what's going on in their heads, how do you prepare, things like that. Please subscribe, like, comment. We're also on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, etc. New episodes every Monday. And do you want to have a duel, or are you busy?
I have another commitment at 8, so unfortunately I don't have much time.
Okay, no worries.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So yeah, that's basically it. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Okay, see you Thursday. Bye bye.